Welcome back to the second hour. And we are really excited to have Jonas, who was here in the first hour, but he is here to talk about vMix integration. Jonas and Jason worked together to really look at how to automate vMix. So this is not vMix is, obviously a lot of software that a lot of people use. And because it's software only, it made its way into the cloud. And because it's in the cloud, obviously you want to start to figure out ways to get it to do a lot of stuff on its own. And what I'm going to do is hand this off to Jonas and have him explain what was created.
And actually, today it's a little more broad, as we're not going into that use case too much. And also Chris is here because there's so many facets of vMix automation. And I just wanted to give a quick overview of the couple levels that are there. So there are some things that I'm going to show you that is not touching any code. It is just in vMix. There's some really neat ways that we can manage audio. There's activators and triggers. So you can trigger things just within vMix. And then there's a whole world of using a scripting language and vMix scripts within scripts. And then there's also the additional to that, and I'm going to show some code examples of using the TCP or HTTP API and doing stuff outside of vMix. So we're kind of doing a roundhouse, all of it. And I know Chris Sabato is also here, who I don't know how he does it, but he runs so many shows together and to a quality for that I'm amazed by. And then, of course, he has all these cool automations where he pulls in data and all that. So it's great to have multiple sides of, I'm mostly in the cloud, and I don't think Chris is using the cloud at all right now. So we have a wealth of different experiences with it here.
So let's talk to what so Chris, tell us a little bit about how you're using vMix.
For me, it's mostly on-prem, in on-prem / on my on-prem cloud. And so I'm on a university campus. And so, just this weekend, we had a soccer event that I couldn't be there. But all my vMix rigs are all connected. I can connect via VPN, get in. And so I could remotely, cut a show from my home to our local cloud, if you want to call it that. And so, it's not, I'm not using AWS.
It could be though. I mean, it's everything short of AWS, right? I mean, I think that's
so the big holdback for me for the whole cloud thing is the fact it's the cost, and so I would need to pay for that. We've got 120 events a year that we would have to pay for cloud infrastructure for. Many times multiple events at the same time. Sometimes as many as 3, and then there's the big ingestion. That's the thing. It's okay, well, here's how much it would cost to do a cloud server versus how much a vMix rig costs. Okay, that maybe those are comparable. Well, I also need to invest in a bunch of stuff to get that signal to the cloud, and so that's why.
It totally makes sense. I think people oftentimes don't think about the cost of running it. For many people, if you're running it all the time or relatively frequently, it makes sense to be on-prem, whether that's software or hardware or other things. It makes sense when you're doing them more sporadically, and oftentimes when you need to scale up to do it in the cloud to make that actually work. Go ahead, Jonas.
And I think one really important thing is, especially if you have consistency in your events, you can plan for them. You have, like Chris says, when he starts a soccer show, he knows there's 10, 20 more this year just like that. One of the things that the cloud does for us and why we lean so heavily in it, we can do a small 2-person show one day, and we can do a multi-stage, multi-track conference the next day, which as a production company, normally can't scale between those without making huge losses because they need to invest into the rig for the big one. And then they can't do the small ones anymore because they don't make enough profit off that. That's one of the things where cloud really comes into play. But the cool thing is vMix applies to both things. And I think there's already a bunch of questions about all the things I wanted to talk about, so we could just...
How convenient. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. So if you've got questions about this, these are the world experts in doing this right now. So if you've got questions about vMix automation, vMix, this process, throw those questions in. let's go ahead and jump into the first one.
First one's coming from the other side of the world, Mumbai. Joel Solomon there says, what are your go-to tools that you use along with vMix?
Go ahead, Jonas.
So we use Companion. I think that is an obvious first. We use Companion for remote control. You can also automate some things in there. Central control is vital for us to use, be able to use faders for audio. And then all my stuff actually, it took me a lot of hesitation for a long time because I didn't want to be responsible and take care of a lot of code. But now a lot of it is just in code because I can change functionality so fast. I use TypeScript. It's Node.js servers that run. But yeah, that's the tools that I use mostly to automate my vMix.
Good, Chris?
Companion. I heavily use Companion. All of my broadcasts all have some custom Python programming intertwined in them. Usually, running. I think it's probably similar to what Jonas is doing with Node.js, but I use Python to make data consumable by vMix, make some changes into vMix, other little things to kind of control vMix from the outside. And then Google Sheets is also heavily used.
One of the things, as I've said before, is I've kind of leaned away from wanting to use little buttons to control a lot of things. I oftentimes want to build a control interface, that I can just have it be the way, look the way I want. What would you guys use for that? If you wanted to build a custom interface that runs on some kind of touch screen, whether it's an iPad or an Android or whatever, what would you use to build that front end so that you could control vMix on the back end? What would be your knee jerk?
This is probably not the right way to do it, but what I usually do in that instance is I build a website. I use Bootstrap, and I put it on a server that's basically on-prem. It's its web servers is publicly accessible, but it's on-prem so that we can make sure that it can connect to our vMix machines, and I put the buttons wherever I want them and code them to do whatever I need. And it's not like your Nemo control pad, but it's 100% controllable, and I can make it look however I want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what we use for this show, by the way, is Universe, which then talks to Isadora, which is there's a whole different platform there. But it's something that I've really thought about when we think about automation, is how much, especially when you're doing the same show over and over and over again, how much you can build an interface that drives something that kind of abstracts you away, given that it's already software. It's already, you could start building another interface. You were going to say something, Jonas?
I'm really similar, actually. I use, it mostly starts with Companion. We build custom logic into Companion. Often Companion also controls the code. And then we embed Companion into the website as a start. We put it behind Cloudflare tunnels, because with that, what it allows us to do is protect the access a little bit, because you still don't want anyone in. But there's so many great solutions now. But I'll be honest, now that I'm not a front end, making beautiful interfaces. There's people that really love that. But for example, I can show you an example how our master control interface looks like. So this is our master control interface. That as soon as I boot it up, it starts the server, it talks to vMix. Those are embedded, right now are still embedded Companion buttons. And all I can do is I can switch between primary, secondary, to graphics, load something into graphics. There's an extended version. We do this for routable outputs for producers and all that. But I also just use websites, because at that point I can just make it work how I want it to work. Works great on an iPad, like on most productions, especially if they're long running and you have to stand up and walk around. As the engineer, I often have the joys of being able to have comms in my ears, and then I can walk around with my iPad in my flat and just make sure everything is still running.
One thing we throw around a lot in this show, and I'm going to have you describe it for our audience, is explain what a Cloudflare tunnel is and how you use it.
Cloudflare tunnel is a reverse proxy, which means normally a proxy is something that you send a request to, and then it sends it to the server. But what a reverse proxy does, it creates a persistent connection to the server, and then it tunnels all the requests through that. But the great thing is that this is initiated from the server. The server makes a connection to the proxy and says, hey, do you have a packet for me? Then the server sends it to it and back. What that allows you to do is have an on-prem web server and have a tunnel that goes out without needing to open any ports, because what it does is it reaches out to the reverse proxy, and then what we use in front of that is Cloudflare Access, which basically is a zero trust solution that allows you to display a login page and only redirect traffic when you have certain criteria or logged in. We have it connected with our SSO. We have it connected with email, so I can just type in the client email and then it logs in with that. Those are the couple possibilities there.
And does that eliminate the need for VPNs to do some of the similar things that you would do otherwise?
Yeah, totally. Because like normally with a VPN, you would need to like VPN into the secured network. But with this, you can access it through the public internet, but it's still secured through the zero trust access. And you don't need to open a port, which is one of the most important things on site when you work with corporate and security is as soon as you even say, hey, could I get a port opened? They suddenly question everything you're doing, and your bandwidth is much worse because someone is looking into all your packets and all that. So we are just like, nope. Do I have port 80 open for like HTTP traffic? Great, that's all I need. And then no one ever worries about it again.
That's great. Yeah, go, Jason.
Yeah, I was going to say the tools like Stream Deck emulator, where you can have physical buttons on your desk, or you can just get a link and have that 32 button interface just through a web portal. Very, very cool. A baller move that Jonas did for me is we were watching a stream and he was like, oh, do you want to take over control? He sent me a link and the controls were just intuitive. Like you could just scroll through it. You could select preview and program and everything just worked. Like when you hand an iPhone to a 2-year-old. I think that stuff is really amazing. Another tool that is in the toolkit that hasn't been mentioned yet is Zoom Rooms interface and the ability to pull contribution elements out of Zoom, the video and the audio isolations. Even if you're doing an event on-prem, the ability to have, a remote host to bring in remote material to add play-by-play or commentary or something else coming from different locations, and to pull it in, either pulling it all up to the cloud or bringing those contribution elements back to the on-prem control room where you're cutting the stuff, is just very, very cool. I think it's cutting edge, and you're not asking your contributors to do anything other than enter into a Zoom meeting, which they already know how to do.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, you're talking about custom panels. So like this is one that I built. This is basically what I built for tagging replay. So in sports, you want to make sure when you capture a replay, you know what that replay is. And this was early on in my replay days when it's like kind of like going to grocery shopping when you're hungry. I don't really use it now because I realize I just don't need all this. But it makes it super easy, like just from clicking a button to like what it was a dunk, it was a 3-point, it was a 5-star play, something I want to see later. Like this is who it was associated with, and so using something like this, like if at this point I thought it was valuable, I could just hand this to a student, to somebody else, and just say, here, tag this. And at the end of the game, like all our replays are tagged with exactly what they are, and I could filter and find whatever I needed.
That's great. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York is up next. Can vMix run automations natively, or do we need to rely on connection with Companion to do this?
Go ahead, Jonas.
So vMix has a couple ways to run automations, and I'm going to cut here and show one of my favorite little tricks is if you need to tie audio follows video to a separate input. So let's, for example, I have my voice to Airbus here and I have my background mix. And normally what this means is audio follows video. So when I cut to this input, it goes there. But let's say in a scene here, I have a slate here where I really want to make sure that every time I go to the slate, it just also fades up the audio. What you can do is you can go into layers here. And of course, today it wants to load for a little longer. And what you already see is you can add things in here, and even if they're not visible with the checkbox unchecked, it will trigger the audio follows video. So what we do this way is you can have a scene, you can have audio follows video with a scene, and the thing that is following it, the audio of the thing that is following it is not actually there. That's one option. The other thing is you have your triggers. So in here, you can set up a trigger, and you can say when this ends, you should do X. If this title changes, you should do Y. Those are the things, and then also you have scripts. But most of the time, one of the reasons why we try to avoid that, and especially triggers, is we found that often you can build yourself a trap that is hard to dig yourself out of. Like if you set up a trigger and you hand it over to another person and something goes catastrophically wrong, it is so hard to figure out why every time like everything goes great, and as soon as you go to the gallery, suddenly it just fades to black, or that's a little intense, or like it removes an audio source, and that is most of the time a trigger. So we never use triggers, but it is possible within vMix.
And in some ways, like for instance, by keeping most of the automation separate, from what if you're just asking, you're treating vMix as a default setting, like that's what it is. It also creates portability for that automation, right? So if you have it automating a vMix, but you decide you want to use Vector, for something, or a client wants to use that, your automation interface, your automation connections, all those things are things that it's just a matter of changing those calls, right?
Yeah, and it's also like I always say like I'm a Control C away from killing all the automation and needing to do it manually,
right.
Which like sometimes it terrifies people, but I'm like, no, I'm like 2 clicks away from terminating the automation and taking over. And will the show suck? Yeah, probably, because we have to like click a whole lot of more buttons, but you could still do it. So like if your automation is freaking out, keep in mind a way to turn it off and make sure that you still have a running show when you turn it off.
You good, Chris?
Yeah, I use a ton of triggers, and for me, it's all stuff that's predictable. So for example, like when I go to a commercial, I want to get all the overlays off the screen. I don't care what they are; they go away. So on the commercial input, there is a trigger to say on transition in, kill all overlays. Stuff like that. Or when I come out of a replay, I want to automatically put the score bug back on. That's a trigger. And so I've got triggers all over the place. I'm not using any like hidden, nested, layered triggers. So for the most part, I know what's happening. But like I said, I use triggers all the time. One of the other things you can do kind of natively is scripting. And one of the issues that I had is we have at our soccer venue, sometimes we don't have a play-by-play person, and so we're just pumping in the PA audio, and the PA audio and the ambient audio kind of it sounds echoey, and so what I want is basically I want to pull down the ambient when the PA is on, and so in vMix I was using a vMix script. I'm basically looking at the levels of that PA, and if there's audio volume coming out of the PA, bring down the level. If that audio goes away, bring back up the ambient, and so that gives me a cleaner sound when the PA person is talking about. And that's all. It's kind of hacky, but that's to me that's the great thing about vMix and this kind of stuff is that you can just make it work.
Next question.
Next question comes from Chirag Cheetah in Dallas. Other than vMix in the cloud, what are some other affordable options for cloud production?
Go ahead, Jonas.
I think you have like OBS as affordable, but it starts to end there pretty quickly. vMix kind of ruined the pricing model for a lot of people by offering a $50 a month subscription, because it's really hard to beat that value. We often still use it for like being able to have an engine that I can program on, because now, especially in the latest version, with all the API commands that are there, you can really treat it as an engine and don't even use the UI for 98% of the things anymore. So that's really where we see there's other tools you can use in the cloud, like Viz or Carbonite Code, but they need a whole lot more production and time to pay off themselves. And like a $50 vMix thing, you can pay that off so easy with a single small record. So how to beat that?
Next question.
Samuel Nordvik in Norway is up next. Is there a reliable way to send commands from vMix to another application?
Good, Jonas.
I end up pulling data from vMix and triggering off base of that. And our control flow most of the time is external to vMix. So the external program then triggers vMix and the other thing. There's like some hacky way with web browsers and being able to send requests that way. And I don't know, maybe Chris has a good solution, but I have not found something that I'm happy with.
Go ahead, Chris.
I mean, I guess it ultimately depends on what you're trying to do. I use scripts for this in what I need. And so, for example, I have some Python scripts that need to run to do things to push data into. And I want to be able to trigger those remotely. And so the way I actually do it is I use Companion to fire a script that runs a Python program. And so from vMix, there's actually a vMix script that is running that program. So it's being initiated by vMix. And so that I could run it natively in vMix. I could run it from Companion. I can do it from other ways, but using that scripting language to kind of push out from outside vMix. That's what I've done. But a lot of it just depends on what you're actually trying to accomplish and to whether or not that would work.
Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York says, I work solo on vMix Productions. I have some Stream Deck buttons and companion automations set up for pushing shots to program and launching the live streams. And I'd like to set up inputs to go to preview whenever they receive audio. Is this possible?
Jonas?
Yeah, so there's a couple things you can do there. In vMix, there is a trigger that has, when it goes over a certain value, you could do that. The other thing you could also do is you get the volume meters left and right. You do get those over the API. So you can do that and make like a little more complex logic there. But here, I'll show it real quick. If you go here into triggers, you can say on audio meter dB18, you want to preview. Like now you would fade preview. You can, here's all the info that you can have. So like you could, see, you would then say preview and that input. So that way, as soon as it hears something, it would preview that. I think that is one of those triggers that could really mess you up sometime. But yeah, it's totally possible with triggers, or like even in Companion, you could use a trigger in Companion that listens to the volume, because Companion also gets that volume. So there's like kind of a couple options there.
Next question.
John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania says, can you explain in simple terms how to get a web page to talk to vMix? And he references the For Dummies book, so he wants it real simple.
Go ahead, Chris.
I don't know if it's simple or not. If you know how to build a web page, maybe. Interacting with vMix is as simple as, you can use TCP requests, but it's as simple as just making a browser request. So like one of the tools that I use regularly, and it's not 100% accurate, but vmixapi.com it has been super handy in trying to figure out like, oh, here's what I want to do. What is the exact wording I need to do? And so, here's just an example of, the fly transition. And here are all the ways that I can trigger it. I can trigger it via companion custom command. Here's how I do it via web scripting. Here's how I do it via .NET scripting. And here's the basic GET request. And so for most of the website stuff that I've done, that's all it's doing is it's putting an HTTP GET request to do that. And so I'm making a button that when you hit that button, it triggers JavaScript to make that GET request. And that's how I do it.
Good, Jonas.
So I do the same thing. One thing to keep in mind is if you need to proxy connections, because like if where the HTML website will be accessed from has access to vMix, and that's a lot simpler. We proxy it through a Node.js server. But that being said, our good friend Claude also can help you with that. Since the vMix API is open and has been out there for a long time, I just asked it to build me a website that has a single button that performs a cut. So if I take that here, paste the HTML code here, stop and start my server, I now have built myself a little thing that I can use. So if I pull vMix over here, hit cut, now it cuts. So can be as simple as just asking one of your local AIs, whatever your favorite is. But that's a good step.
I took your question, by the way, and just cut and pasted it into ChatGPT, and it explained all the steps, wrote some HTML, and told me how it worked. and I opened it, and it has vMix controller, cut to input 1, fade to input 2, like as little buttons. So it's become kind of. But I literally didn't do anything with the prompt other than take your question and just put it in there. So it really is amazing. Definitely think about using those as you try to figure out like how to hack through something. Next question.
Samuel Nordvik's back from Norway with this question. What are some vMix tips and tricks that most people don't know about?
Go, Jonas.
I think that trick with using an invisible layer to trigger audio follows video is pretty neat. Another one is, let me cut to something else real quick. So when you have your buses here, a lot of people forget that you can actually name them. And one of the tricks that we do is if you click add input, you can actually add a bus and do a loop through. So if you go audio input, you can do like bus A, for example.
You're ruining my demo for tomorrow.
Oh.
And
there'll be even more tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll dig more into this tomorrow. But yeah, I was going to talk about this exactly tomorrow. Yeah.
So like you can like pull it back in, and what you now can do if you combine it with the first trick is I could go to all of my NDI inputs, and even if I have ISO audio for each speaker, I can go in and go into layers. And what I would do is add bus A, which is my voice bus, to that. So now automatically, as I cut to any of my panelists is visible, the whole or voice bus is going to be there, which really helps you. Like we often use voice and music buses for like multilingual production. So like the second engineer can just pull out stems and do something with that. But I think those are my the tricks that I use most. Also, you can build your own multi-viewer, which I find super neat. And this copy paste also works across countries and machines. We had a use case where we had a vMix preset in show, and we needed to copy paste multi-view values to Oklahoma, and I had the preset here locally. So Tucker and I, we both remoted into the same cloud system through Splashtop, which shares your keyboard. I hit copy, he hit paste. So we like transferred it through the clipboard, which is kind of neat.
That sounds cool.
Good, Chris.
One of the things that I use regularly is if you're using a lot of triggers and you're creating new inputs that need similar triggers, is that from your input, you can go down to the bottom And so here are all the the triggers I have on this particular one. I can click copy from, select which one I want to, and then I can import the triggers, I can import the layers, color effects, whatever the input, and basically pulling specific settings you've made to another input into a new input. That makes it so much easier, especially if you do something with a lot of triggers.
Next question.
Robert Linkrum in Belmont Shores, California is up next. What PCIe card or cards for SDI and or BNC camera input would you recommend? And is the Sonnet box a good holder for these cards?
Go ahead, Chris.
I am using DeckLinks. I have a couple DeckLink Duos. I have one DeckLink Quad. I have a DeckLink Duo in a Sonnet enclosure. Yes.
Next question.
Joel Solomon back from Mumbai with this one. With a portable vMix streaming setup in mind, what hardware would you recommend?
Go, Jonas.
It really depends. But one of the great things that vMix, I think, has done is if you go to their website, they have reference systems. They have some examples on what you should buy, but also you can look at the spec and find something that is similarly spec'd. I always like to have Thunderbolt, so I can add Ultra Studio or DeckLink cards in an enclosure for SDI inputs. A lot of people also just use NDI with vMix. If you have a couple, like for example, the CRM 300 that is behind me also works with SRT, so you could just show up with those, send all the SRT feeds up to the cloud with SRT and cut in the cloud in vMix. So it really depends, but I would always check out the vMix recommended hardware and then just steal the specs from there. They test those. They do a lot of testing on that. And I think that's one of the smartest moves they've done, that they give you like, hey, this is how this system looks. This is what it can do. It can do 8 channels of all that. And then it's on you to police yourself to not go over that.
Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota is up with this. What are your favorite text editors for writing and editing code, and why?
Go ahead, Chris.
I use VS Code because it's simple, it's free, it has tons of plugins that I can run my Python scripts directly from VS Code to make sure they're working before I'm running them independently on the machine. There's all kinds of things to, I do a lot of data exchange, so pumping out JSON files, so I can pump out a JSON file and then format it in VS Code to look at it, pretty print essentially. VS Code for me.
Go, Jonas.
I would say +1 for VS Code, and then Notepad++ drives me crazy if a system does not have Notepad++ on it. And like, I use it for notes. I use it for like VS Code is my workspace, and if I need to like note what APIs I'm using or anything, that always ends up in Notepad++ in unsaved text files. So that's always the fun part of that. But yeah, VS Code hands down is for me the best editor for this kind of things. You have like what I use a lot for the HTML stuff is there's a live server plugin. So you just click launch, and now you can look at the HTML. If you make changes, it refreshes it automatically. I'm really happy with it, especially for the price.
Next question.
Hamza Abdufaras in Marrakesh, Morocco says, using vMix scripting, is there a way to avoid breaking my scripts if I add an input not at the end of the numbering, but in the middle or something, as now if I want to take an input down and replace it by color bars so I don't break the scripts?
Go ahead, Jonas.
So there's a couple ways that you can address an input within vMix. There's the ID, the name, and technically also the index. So the ID actually is a really long string that sometimes is really hard to find because you need to find it within the API request and all that. And sometimes that gets really complicated real fast, because then if you make changes and the ID changes, you have no idea why. I use a combination out of index and name. So for example, if I look at my vMix file, all of our vMix files start with speakers at the start. one of the reasons for that is it really sucks if you need to change something on the speaker. So I always know 1 to 10 is my speakers. Those are my NDI sources. They won't change. If I need something else, I put it at the end. And then what I do is scenes I address by names, and then I have all these dynamic scenes that I can automatically build up. And I make sure that I use unique names for all of those. I try to not use index above 10, because then you totally run into those issues.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I do think pretty similar. At the top of my vMix is my cameras, and so those are I'm usually addressing those via input number. So if I 4 cameras, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Everything after that is named. I've had some people tell me that they always use GUIDs, and GUIDs are hard to find, and they're there. But yeah, for the most part, like my cameras, which are like the first couple inputs, I'm going to address those by number so I can move those around so that camera 1 is always first, camera 2 is always 2, but I could just flop those inputs and everything still is the same. And then after that, all my titles and everything like that, I'm accessing via name.
Next question.
Håkan Fors in Stockholm, Sweden. Any recommendations how to document your various vMix automations? For example, triggers, scripts, shortcuts, and companion commands.
Go ahead, Jonas.
We have sheets, and with a Notional internal wiki, everything is listed. I think if you work as a as a one-person band, it's not as important. What I do is I work in a lot of environments where I build the automation, and then my production staff takes over, or production people that I sometimes don't even get to talk to. We have 10 people on staff that then just do that show. And there it becomes really important to write change logs. Those are really important that you can tell them what is wrong. Not give them too much insight. I split documentation, so there's an engineering documentation. I always say, if I win in the lottery and I'm not interested at all anymore in working on this, and another engineer needs to work on this, what do they need to know? That is like internal variables. Where do I rely on IDs? Where do I rely on names? What are those names that I rely on? What triggers is? What is the expected behavior? Plus a change log. And then for our TDs, and production staff, we do a change log, and then we show them how do you enable and disable the automation, how do you get back to show, how do you override the automation. And for one project where we had where we were running a almost daily show, we actually did fire drills where we onboarded them to tests. And I just went in and broke things in the automation and said, well, we have a show in 30 seconds, fix it. And so we actually train people on how to circumvent the automation, how to get around it. We have escalation ladders for that. So it's not only important that you document how it works, but also what to do when it doesn't work, because that is almost as important. Don't make it too extensive, because otherwise no one will read it thoroughly. They will just fly over it. So like we sometimes use decision trees for like what should you do. And then any external reliability should be heavily documented. And in my opinion, if it's a third-party vendor that is not your client, and most of the time, even if it is your client, I put Uptime Robot or something similar on it. So I know every single time, oh, they just pushed an update. Oh, their web server went down for 30 seconds. Oh, this happened, that happened. And often we end up with clients coming with the third-party vendors asking our clients if they can get our tools, because we can show them more exactly what happened to their stack, what issues they had, and their own internal DevOps team could. So monitor it as well.
Good, Chris.
I am on the complete other end of the spectrum. I have no documentation, and it's all up here. I'm pretty much the one doing it, and if it breaks, I'm the one that needs to fix it. And if I go away, the odds are they're not going to replace me with someone who's going to do this kind of thing. So for me, it's time, and I don't have the time to do the documentation, and the return on that is just not there for me.
So like the entire university's coverage of their sports comes down to one person. So careful. Next question.
Joel Solomon in Mumbai back with, how can one go about learning vMix scripting? Any YouTube channels or sites that you would recommend?
Go ahead, Chris.
I would start maybe with the vMix forums. There's a forum kind of getting started with scripting. It's essentially vb.net with a lot of caveats. So, as you're kind of dinking in and like, oh, I want to do this. I'm usually going to start with searching, like, how do I do that in vb.net? And then I look at the responses, and if it's including like other libraries and stuff, I'm probably not going to be able to do that in vMix, and because that's not available. And so it's really, for me, it's just kind of tinkering, figure out what you want to try and do, and try and make it work. Because like I said, the actual scripting language in vMix, it's vb.net with a lot of stuff that's not accessible.
Go ahead, Jonas.
Yeah, I would say find use cases where you need it. Like, if you don't need it, don't do it. I'm a strict believer in figure out where the complexity is and where you need to abstract complexity away to have a better show. And most of the time, it's not about like, because your staff isn't capable of doing it. It is about consistency. If I have 5 different TDs, I need to abstract a lot of vMix things so the show is consistent. They don't have access to all the transitions. So not suddenly one TD comes to the great idea to do a barn wipe or something instead of the fade. Like, I want to set them up for success. So that's how I use the abstraction. And then also think about how can you use automation to get the head of the TD free to do on top amazing things. Like, one of the greatest things that I see when we do automation is we try to build it in a way, and I have a demo that I can show in a little bit, that shows how like we try to remove cycles from the TD of like, this is what I hear, this is what I need, and like have a direct flow of like consciousness with that. And then they can like, suddenly they become creative. Suddenly they like are able to follow, okay, actually he said that, can we pull that up? Like, they start managing graphics better. They start interacting with the producer. They are able to, like, I don't know, go in and clean up color correction of a camera and stuff like that. And that's where I see automation, like removing cognitive load and cycles from people's head. So they are just more comfortable, stay there better. And that's also how, like, a lot of the times you can keep freelancers easier, because like they're like, oh, well, working with you is a lot easier than when I get thrown in with a custom preset. I have no idea what triggers are there. So automation for us also is really vital to making sure our freelancers stay happy.
And, it's really like an automatic with manual override, and being able to, a lot of us, I think about, they talk about pilots. One of the reasons flying is so safe now is because the pilots don't do most of the middle part. The plane is doing most of that work. And if there's something that comes up that they need to handle, they can handle it, but they're able to stay fresh and do what they need to do and stay focused because they're not, constant management cycle of minutia. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, we're seeing this happening in the television news space also, with automated production control, where they are really slimming down the control room and behind camera roles, and they're putting in a lot of coding and automation. The rundowns have codes in them that describe when you move from one item to the next. It's moving the cameras, it's changing the focus, it's changing what appears on the teleprompter, things like that. And this is a new role in broadcasting, APC operator, that lots of people at the college level and beyond are training up to, because they are sitting with the producer and basically running an entire show by themselves. So, and I think a lot of the things we're doing with automation, with vMix and with Companion and things like that, are replacing equipment that at the professional level is hundreds of thousands of dollars, robotic cameras and things like that. And so I think it's exciting what we're doing, and it's very cutting edge. And I'm very excited about getting students access to be able to train and simulate in these kind of environments, because there are professional jobs waiting for them if they figure this stuff out.
Next question.
Håkan Fors, back to us from Stockholm, Sweden, says, how much automation do you recommend inside vMix versus in Companion?
Jonas?
And this is one of the things I like about today's second hour is you have me much more on the corporate side and like cloud and having multiple people needing to think about legacy, needing to think about multiple, like up to 10, 15 operators. And then you have Chris, who like lives on the other end, does sports mostly and is by himself and can like do the other thing. And that's really why I love that we're both on this panel today, because they are both worlds. And I don't think either of them is wrong. It's just completely different needs. So for me, I would not move any other, like triggers for us right now is just a hard point. That's where we stop integrating into vMix and it becomes part of our control system. There's sometimes like small things that you can't do other ways that might be fine with that. But like we even moved borders out of vMix. So vMix has this annoying bug where like the border sticks out in the lower, like in the corner. So we built HTML overlays for that. We tend, especially since I do a lot of the engineering, we tend to do most stuff externally from vMix. But I'm sure Chris has a lot more within vMix.
Good, Chris.
Maybe not as much as you think. For the most part, for me, I'm not doing anything in Companion that is autonomous. Like I am doing things that are automated, but Companion's not doing anything on its own. I'm clicking a button and it's doing something in vMix. I don't have any triggers in Companion. I don't want anything in Companion kind of running on its own. I want to click a button and it may do several things, but I'm clicking a button for it to do that. Anything that's autonomous, that's kind of running on its own without any like input, I'm trying to do that in vMix, and mostly that's just triggers and like on transition in, on transition out, hiding things, showing things like that. But that's pretty much where I'm at.
Next question.
Hamza Abu Fares, back from Marrakesh, Morocco. vMix on the cloud with Companion. Would you recommend a Companion on a separate EC2 instance running to control both local NDI devices and remote machines?
Jonas?
So we started out with running Companion locally and shipping around setting files. We stopped that. We now run vMix Companion either on the vMix instance, or it's really simple to just build your own self a little Ubuntu vMix Companion server, and then use Companion satellite for that. We use that, and then we have side-to-side VPNs if we need to control other things. That way, it can easily like give access through Cloudflare tunnels or something like that. One of the great things now with the latest Companion update is you can decide how big the grid is and how big the grid is for the emulators. So we often have, like I had a producer who all they needed to know is what page we were on in the deck and a button to like see if the stage is hot and they can talk to people there or not. All I did is I created an emulator that was 2 little Companion buttons, sent it to them, and now they can see it. Next time they were like, hey, I can take over like forwarding and backwarding slides. So it just added 2 more buttons to that. And that's kind of how we do it. I would try, especially if you are more than one operator, to centralize your Companion file by running it on a server. If it's on vMix or a separate server, just depends on load. We often, my automation also runs on that server. So that's why I have a separate server for that. And then, connect to that.
Next question.
Håkan Fors, Stockholm, back again. Any recommendations on how to automate run of show or rundown with vMix?
So we talked a little bit about that as far as, being able to use that, connect those two together. Go ahead, Jonas.
So queues by Tinkerlist is basically the biggest one for that right now. They have tools integrated that allow you to automatically load files, automatically do things. Central control. Joe built triggers and a rundown where like you can trigger things. It's right now for him, I think it's still a Google Sheets or Excel file, and then you like go through and that triggers things. I don't have shows that don't change enough that makes sense. Like I'm going to show in a little bit a demo of how on the fly we need to be with our shows, because I never want to need to tell a producer no because we didn't think of it. Like if I'm known in our team as the guy who goes to the talent client and says no, but that is to protect the show. I don't want to need to say no because of, oh, sorry, we didn't think about that 3 up or that 2 up or something like that. Or sorry, we can't go from there to there because my automation system is just as incremental steps, and I can hit go or I can hit previous, but if you want to jump over that queue, that I don't know what happens then. We never tested that. But Qs has that and is basically the leader for that right now.
One more question before your demo.
Håkan Forst, back from Stockholm. Any creative ways you use dynamic inputs for automation?
Thoughts there? Yeah, go ahead.
We used, at the start, we used dynamic inputs. So to explain it, basically it's a way to have variables. There's 2 ways. There's dynamic text and dynamic inputs. Dynamic inputs allow you to have up to 4 inputs that you can set. Then you can use them as an input. So for example, what we did in the start when we didn't have the automation is we used that to like you set one of the panelists into the dynamic input, and then you have another button that sets it into a box or similar stuff like that. Most of the time we don't use it anymore because it kind of got a little annoying managing that. Like managing state within vMix that you can't easily see, not a big fan of.
So you have a demo for us?
Yeah, so one of the things we often run into with doing a show, and especially these virtual shows, is, let me get to my vMix. We all know the thing where like all you do is like you cut from one speaker to the next one, and I just have a couple pictures of me loaded there. So what I built is, I'm gonna need to pull up my companion real quick, is this interface. And this was a lot inspired. The first project we used it on was a 24-hour show where I had to rotate TDs, but I had the issue that the client was an NGO and didn't know what they wanted to do with the 24 hours yet. So I needed a way to quickly build a panel. So for example, I needed a 1-up, and most of the time we do 1-ups in a recessed look. Now I can just keep clicking people and it builds the looks for that. You see the tallies up there. And one of the neat things is if I now start with panel 2 and then go to panel 1, now I have that way. So if the client overcomes is like, no, the CEO just sent me a text message. They never want to be on the left side. Now I can just change in what order I click it, and it just builds that layout. Of course, it also goes to preview, and then we have a second version of that makes sure that we never mess up the preview. So like you can do another version of the 4-up, then cut between those. Let's see. On this preset, we don't have content looks. Because what normally we do is like you have a look with like screen share, and then you can click people. And then lower thirds are also automated with this. Since we always know who is on there, we have a backend where when I pin people, I say who is where. That loads in the lower thirds automatically. So our TD can never mess up the lower thirds because vMix tells us who is on program. And I told vMix or my automation system, hey, this person is there. So similar to how we do it on office hours, I just wanted to remove the possibility for my TDs to accidentally font the CEO of a company wrong. So that's kind of what goes in there. And this has, it's saved us. Because like you, and this is kind of like what I was talking about, removing complexity. Now it's just, you don't have to think about where am I, where do I have to go, what, okay, it's a 3-box look. I need to load this emim for the 3-box, and then key 1 is this person, key 2 is this person, key 3 is this person. Now I clicked about 6 to 7 keys when all the producer called for, I need a 2-up with 3 and 4. And now you have it. I need a 5-up with all of them, but in this order. I need to have only panel 2. I need like all of that. And I wanted to have this flow as much as it is of the natural speech. So like producers just call it, and our TDs can do this, but this allows them to still be like flexible and say like, oh, you wanted them turned? Sure, I can give it to you turned. Oh, you wanted that person instead of that person there? Sure. Oh, you told us there's not going to be a 3-up with those 4 people, but now will someone just drop? No problem. Like that is the kind of flexibility that I love. And then this is our basic setup in vMix. I hate pages. I don't know what it is. I just hate pages. So I end up building these tabs where you can mute things, play out. And then this is one of, I'll show this real quick. Let me show this best. Speaker 2, I built this so it's basically allows me to, let me preview Speaker 2. It allows you to use the EPD set within vMix to fix framing. Because everybody knows at some point there's a point where you just can't push the talent anymore. They're like, oh yeah, fine, I'll change it. But like now they're getting annoyed and asking them to get the 4th book because they put their laptop not high enough. What this allows me to do is, if I go in here and enable virtual PT set, enable the wrong version on this computer. But what you can do in there is you have a virtual PD set for each of the speakers. You can zoom in, fade around, and frame them up. Yes, you'll use some resolution, but I'll take that every day of the week for like more consistent looks. So all of that here we can route feeds to stage, green room, multi-viewer. So like we have a green room for all our client, and sometimes they're like, hey, can you dim that? You can just hit sure. Now it's dimmed, pulls down that feed. They want to see something, you can do that. And then we just have like go to last 30, go to last 60. And one of the favorite things we have built is a button that when you press it, it pulls the time remaining of a video playout from vMix and inserts it into stage timer, which is what we use for all the timing. So you just hit that, it syncs it to stage timer, and now everybody knows how long that playout is. We built that for a show where we had like hours and hours of playout. That's the little demo.
That's great. Thanks, Jonas. And thanks, Chris. Thank you both for this great second hour. Covered a lot of ground. So, and tomorrow, Chris is going to talk more about audio. Jonas, will you be joining us for tomorrow as well?
I don't know yet. I'll have to see.
The hook. This is how it happens. Thank you so much to both of you for being here and giving us your time and all the preparation that I'm sure it took to be ready for this. And thanks to our panelists who make this possible every day. Our first hour panelists, second hour panelists can't do it without you. Thanks to the producers who asked all these questions, kept it all going. We did almost no presentation today. That is the model. Like that is what we want to do is, hey, here's what we're going to talk about. And then all of you drive that conversation through your questions, both in the first hour and the second hour. And everyone did a great job today. We filled it right up. So fantastic work. And thanks to the development team, which includes these two guys, as well as a lot of other people that help office hours actually happen. Obviously, when you look at this, you can see that this is not a run-of-the-mill show on Zoom. There's a lot going on, and the development team makes this all possible, and we really appreciate everybody's contribution. Today, if we had done this on foot and gone place to place, we call that the Tlaloc Traversal, would have traveled 99,000 miles. That is 159,000 kilometers, and that is 780 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
Boy, adjusting for Keynote, like that was a straight up mic drop. Like I knew you could do that, but like to need to do it enough that like you got the arrow keys down, mic drop.
It is. It just saves us so much because like when you have like the last event we did, we had 14 speakers coming in over Teams. So already everybody's on edge because half the stuff doesn't work. Why would it? It's Teams.
Like was audio recording on, please?
Oops, I'm sorry. Did the internet get that? Oh.
Hey, I'll see you guys in just a second. I'm going to jump up.
It's like, but yeah, that saves us so many time. And then the quick being able to build up things is great.
The hosts and views and opinions of Office Hours do not actually reflect any sort of hatred towards Microsoft.
I think
Thank you.
that